Do you seek a hero to save you from the chaos of your life? Do you long for a champion to fight your battles, to carry your burdens, to shield you from every storm? Consider for a moment. True heroism begins not in battles waged upon the world, but within the self. You want freedom. First, you must learn to depend on no one but yourself. The modern world is enamored with external saviors, celebrities, leaders, influencers, figures who promise deliverance but offer only illusions. Yet, the greatest rescue is not one you await from afar. It is the quiet, relentless forging of your own character in the crucible of adversity. The Stoic path calls you not to surrender your autonomy, but to seize it. It demands a turning inward, a radical reevaluation of what it means to be strong and free. This is not an easy journey. It is fraught with the temptation to cling to others, to seek validation, to hide behind the armor of societal approval. But ask yourself, can any external force grant the invincibility that arises from knowing you alone are the master of your fate? The answer echoes in the silence of your own soul. No one else holds the key to your inner citadel. You begin to understand that becoming your own hero requires more than courage. It demands a profound acceptance of responsibility. Responsibility not merely for actions taken, but for the very attitude with which you meet each challenge, each disappointment, each fleeting joy. You stop blaming fate, other people, or circumstance. That's not weakness, it's clarity. You recognize that the ultimate power lies not in changing the world around you, but in mastering your response to it. This shift in perspective is the doorway to genuine autonomy. The notion of heroism you have inherited is incomplete. It paints heroes as figures of grandeur, visibility, and external conquest. True heroism doesn't clamor for applause or recognition. It dwells quietly in the daily acts of self-mastery, in the steadfast commitment to virtue in the face of temptation, in the unwavering resolve to uphold your principles when no one is watching. You want to be your own hero? Then begin by rewriting the story you tell yourself about what it means to be heroic. You are not a victim of circumstance, but the architect of your own destiny. This realization is not a boast, but a burden, a solemn charge to cultivate the inner resources that allow you to stand unshaken amid the storms of existence. The Stoics speak of autarkia, self-sufficiency, as the cornerstone of virtue. It is not an isolation from the world, but a mastery over your desires and emotions so that external events no longer dictate your peace. When you achieve this, you become a fortress unto yourself, impervious to the chaos that seeks to unravel lesser minds. Yet, this is not a destination easily reached. It is a lifelong pursuit, a relentless refinement of your character and judgment. You begin to see the folly in reliance on external heroes because they are fallible, transient, and often enslaved by their own passions and fears. You stop outsourcing your power. You reclaim it by cultivating strength within. This internal strength is your bulwark against despair, your sword against complacency, your shield against the corrosive influence of dependence. Consider the paradox. Freedom is found not in the absence of challenges, but in the mastery of one's response to them. The Stoic hero does not flee hardship, but embraces it as the forge of resilience. Every trial becomes an opportunity to exercise wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, the four pillars of Stoic virtue. You begin to realize that the hero you have long sought outside yourself has always been within, waiting to awaken through deliberate effort and reflection. You stop searching for easy answers or quick fixes. That's not true strength. You begin to cultivate patience, the kind that endures setbacks without bitterness, that learns from failure rather than succumbs to it. You stop seeking comfort in dependency. That's not freedom. You strive instead for autonomy, the power to govern yourself with reason and integrity regardless of circumstance. This is the essence of Stoicism, the art of living well by living according to nature and reason, not according to the fleeting whims of desire or fear. The journey toward becoming your own hero asks you to confront uncomfortable truths. It requires that you look unflinchingly at your weaknesses and fears, not to despair, but to understand and conquer them. You stop hiding behind excuses. You stop blaming others. You stop pretending that salvation comes from outside. That's not heroism. True heroism doesn't abdicate responsibility. It doesn't seek refuge in illusions or distractions. It stands firm, rooted in the conviction that your greatest ally is the strength you nurture within. You begin to cultivate a mindset that is unshaken by praise or blame, triumph or failure. You understand that external events are indifferent. They have no power except the meaning you assign them. This realization frees you from the chains of dependency on circumstance or approval. You stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the helm. You steer through stormy seas by the compass of your own reason and virtue. The world will continue to offer countless distractions, false idols, and quick fixes. You stop being seduced by these because you recognize their impermanence and insufficiency. That's not cynicism, but wisdom. You cultivate discernment, the ability to separate what is within your control from what lies beyond it. You stop wasting energy on externalities and focus instead on the domain where your power is absolute, your own mind and actions. In this awakening, you find an unexpected peace. Not the peace of complacency or passivity, but the peace that arises from self-mastery and acceptance. You stop fearing the unknown because you know that no matter what happens, you have the inner resources to endure and prevail. That's not arrogance, but stoic confidence. The quiet assurance born of disciplined practice and deep understanding. You begin to see your life as a work of art, shaped not by chance or others' wills, but by your own deliberate choices. You stop being a spectator and become the creator of your narrative. This is the essence of becoming your own hero, the recognition that you are the prime mover in your existence, the sovereign of your mind, the guardian of your virtue. True heroism is not a spectacle. It is a silent, steadfast revolution within. It is the daily decision to meet life on your own terms, to cultivate strength where weakness once reigned, to choose reason over impulse, virtue over convenience. You stop waiting for someone else to lead you to freedom. You begin to lead yourself. That's not isolation, but the highest form of autonomy. Remember, the Stoic path does not promise ease or comfort. It promises the dignity and freedom that come from standing firm in your own power. It challenges you to embrace responsibility fully, to relinquish the illusion of external saviors, and to awaken the hero within. The journey begins now. The hero you seek is you, forged in the fires of self-discipline, wisdom, and courage. Will you answer the call? You begin to grasp that self-sufficiency is not merely an attribute, but the very essence of virtue itself. It is the foundation upon which all Stoic wisdom stands. Autarkia, the Greek term for self-sufficiency, embodies a profound truth. The truest independence arises not from severing ties with the world, but from mastering the desires, emotions, and judgments that otherwise enslave you. You stop looking outward for assurance because you realize that no external circumstance, no matter how favorable or hostile, can command your inner peace unless you permit it. This mastery is not a gift bestowed by fate, but a conquest earned through relentless effort. You stop confusing dependence with connection. That's not the kind of self-sufficiency the Stoics espouse. True autonomy is not isolation. It is the sovereignty of the mind that remains intact regardless of external conditions. You begin to understand that the state of being truly self-sufficient is a fortress built from the stones of reason, resilience, and virtue, each laid carefully with deliberate intention. Consider how often you have allowed your happiness or tranquility to hinge on things beyond your control, on the opinions of others, on material wealth, on fleeting pleasures. You stop this pattern, not through denial, but through insight. The Stoic teaches that these externals are indifferent. They hold no intrinsic power to harm or bless you unless you surrender your judgment to them. You begin to reclaim your authority over your own mind, realizing that the root of your freedom lies precisely in this sovereignty. The journey toward autarkia demands that you refine your desires and aversions. You stop chasing after every whim or impulse that arises. That's not repression, it's discernment. You cultivate the ability to desire only what is within your control and to remain indifferent to what is not. This shift is no small feat. It requires vigilance and honesty, for your mind is a battlefield where old habits and false beliefs wage war against emerging wisdom. You start to see how self-sufficiency aligns with the Stoic ideal of living in accordance with nature and reason. This alignment is not passive submission but active engagement. You stop resisting the reality of your limitations and embrace them as the soil in which virtue can grow. You understand that trying to control the uncontrollable is a futile endeavor that only breeds frustration and despair. Instead, you focus your energy where it truly matters, in governing your responses and shaping your character. With this perspective, you stop being a slave to external fortunes or misfortunes. That's not indifference in the sense of apathy. It's an empowered neutrality that frees you from the tyranny of circumstance. You develop a mindset that remains steady whether fortune smiles or frowns. This is the hallmark of true self-sufficiency, the ability to maintain your inner equilibrium regardless of outer tumult. You begin to appreciate how this inner freedom fosters peace of mind. The Stoic understands that tranquility is not granted by the world, but cultivated within. You stop seeking peace as a prize to be won and start nurturing it as a state of being, born from the mastery of your own mind. The more you practice this, the less you are shaken by external events, and the more you stand as an unmovable pillar amid the shifting tides of life. This mastery extends beyond your emotions to your judgments. You stop accepting at face value the opinions and narratives imposed by others or by society. That's not arrogance, it's clarity. You learn to examine your beliefs critically, to question assumptions, and to align your judgments with reason and virtue. This intellectual sovereignty is inseparable from emotional self-control. Together, they form the bedrock of your autonomy. You begin to realize that self-sufficiency is not a static achievement, but a dynamic process, a continuous cultivation of resilience and wisdom. You stop seeking a final state of perfection and instead embrace the path of constant growth. This humility is not weakness but strength. The strength to acknowledge your flaws without surrendering to them. The courage to persist despite setbacks. The wisdom to learn from every experience. You stop confusing dependence on others for genuine support with the loss of your own agency. That's not to say you reject relationships or community. The Stoics value fellowship and recognize that humans are social creatures. But you understand that true support comes not from reliance, but from mutual respect between autonomous individuals. You begin to see that authentic connection flourishes when each person stands firm in their own sovereignty. This insight transforms how you engage with the world. You stop being reactive, tossed by every opinion or event. Instead, you cultivate a presence grounded in self-possession. This presence is not cold detachment, but a warm, unshakable center from which you can act with clarity and purpose. It is the kind of presence that commands respect, not through force or dominance, but through quiet confidence and integrity. You begin to embody a virtue that radiates outward, influencing others not by coercion, but by example. You stop seeking validation because you understand that the approval of others is neither a measure of your worth nor a prerequisite for your peace. That's not isolation, but liberation. Your self-sufficiency becomes contagious, inviting others to awaken their own inner strength. In this way, you forge a new relationship with desire and emotion. You stop being their slave, caught in cycles of craving and aversion. Instead, you become their master, discerning which impulses serve your highest good and which undermine it. This mastery is the essence of freedom, the freedom to choose your path unbound by the tyranny of unexamined passions. You start to notice how this internal command alters your experience of life's inevitable hardships. You stop fearing loss or misfortune because you understand that your true wealth lies not in possessions or status, but in the resilience of your character. This resilience is not brittle toughness, but flexible strength, able to bend without breaking, to endure without despair. You stop confusing vulnerability with weakness. That's not the kind of self-sufficiency the Stoics admire. Vulnerability, acknowledged and embraced, becomes a source of strength, a gateway to deeper understanding and compassion. You learn to hold your vulnerabilities with courage, neither denying nor being overwhelmed by them. This balance deepens your autonomy rather than diminishes it. You begin to appreciate the paradox that self-sufficiency includes openness, not closure. You stop erecting walls that isolate you from the world. Instead, you cultivate boundaries that protect your inner freedom while allowing genuine connection. This discernment is a subtle art, requiring constant attention and refinement. You see how this art of self-sufficiency permeates every aspect of your life: your thoughts, your emotions, your relationships, and your actions. You stop living passively, swept along by circumstance or impulse. Instead, you take up the active role of steward over your own mind and soul. This stewardship is the highest form of virtue because it is the foundation upon which all other virtues rest. You begin to realize that the pursuit of self-sufficiency is the pursuit of freedom itself. You stop mistaking freedom for license or indulgence. True freedom is the mastery of oneself, the ability to live according to reason and virtue rather than being a slave to fleeting desires or external pressures. This freedom is the birthright of every human being, waiting to be claimed through conscious effort and unwavering commitment. You stop seeking freedom as an external condition and start cultivating it as an internal state. That's not resignation, but empowerment. You awaken to the truth that no matter what the world throws at you, your capacity for self-governance remains intact. This awakening transforms fear into courage, confusion into clarity, and despair into hope. You begin to embody the Stoic ideal of the sage, not a distant, unattainable figure, but a living presence within yourself. The sage is one who has cultivated self-sufficiency so completely that external circumstances no longer dictate their happiness or virtue. You stop seeing this ideal as a distant goal and start recognizing it as a practical guide for your daily life. You understand that this path is not solitary in the sense of loneliness, but solitary in the sense of self-possession. You stop needing the constant reassurance of others because you have become your own source of strength and wisdom. This self-possession is the cornerstone of the Stoic life, the wellspring from which all true freedom flows. You begin to see your life through a new lens, one that honors your capacity for resilience, your power to choose, and your responsibility to cultivate virtue. You stop being a passive recipient of fate and become an active participant in your own growth. This transformation is the heart of self-sufficiency, the core of Stoic wisdom, and the foundation of true inner freedom. You begin to see that self-sufficiency is not a matter of passive endurance, but an active cultivation, a daily practice of discipline and rational control that transforms your character from within. It is through this continuous effort that you forge the inner armor necessary to navigate the vicissitudes of life without being undone. You stop waiting for external circumstances to grant you peace or strength. That's not the Stoic way. Instead, you embrace the discipline of reason and self-mastery as the tools with which you carve your own freedom. Each day becomes an opportunity to exercise your moral compass, to align your decisions and emotions with virtue rather than impulse. You stop surrendering to immediate gratification or reactive passion. That's not repression, it's sovereignty over yourself. You cultivate the capacity to pause, to reflect, to choose deliberately rather than be swept like a leaf on the wind of circumstance. This practice is the very essence of self-discipline, an inner vigilance that guards against the erosion of your autonomy. You begin to understand that rational control is not the denial of emotion, but its mastery. You stop treating feelings as tyrants demanding obedience. That's not Stoicism in its truest form, but a misunderstanding of it. Instead, you learn to observe your emotions with clarity, to understand their origins, their triggers, and their transient nature. You cultivate the capacity to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to acknowledge pain without surrendering to despair, to experience joy without attachment. This rational engagement with your inner world transforms challenges from threats into opportunities. You stop recoiling from adversity. That's not bravery born of ignorance, but courage forged in wisdom. Every difficulty becomes a training ground for your character, a chance to practice patience, resilience, and equanimity. You learn to see obstacles as the raw material from which your virtue is shaped, rather than as punishments to be avoided. You stop seeking external validation for your choices. That's not isolation, but self-trust. The Stoic teaches that your moral compass must be guided by reason and virtue alone, not by the shifting opinions of others. You cultivate an inner authority that is independent, unwavering, and clear. This authority is your anchor amidst the stormy seas of social pressure and uncertainty. You begin to appreciate how this discipline extends beyond mere thought into action. You stop procrastinating or rationalizing away your responsibilities. That's not harshness, but integrity. You commit to your duties with steadfastness, knowing that your character is revealed and refined in what you do, not merely what you think or say. This alignment of intention and action is the hallmark of true self-mastery. You stop confusing busy work or distraction with meaningful effort. That's not productivity, but avoidance. You cultivate the ability to focus, to direct your energy toward what is truly within your control and aligned with your values. This focus is a form of freedom, freedom from the chaos of scattered attention and the tyranny of fleeting desires. You begin to notice how rational control brings clarity where there was once confusion and turmoil. You stop being tossed by every impulse or external event. That's not rigidity, but stability. Your mind becomes a calm harbor where reason holds sway, where emotions are acknowledged but not dictating, where virtue is the guiding light. This clarity empowers you to navigate life's complexities with grace and strength. You cultivate patience, the kind that withstands delays, disappointments, and setbacks without bitterness or despair. You stop reacting with frustration when things do not go as planned. That's not resignation but acceptance. You embrace the Stoic principle of distinguishing between what is within your control and what is not, directing your efforts only where they can have effect. This discernment saves you from wasted energy and needless suffering. You begin to embody temperance, the restraint that moderates desire and impulse. You stop indulging in excesses that weaken your resolve or cloud your judgment. That's not deprivation, but freedom. You choose moderation because it serves your higher purpose, because it aligns with the sovereignty of your reason and virtue. This choice is an act of power, not sacrifice. You stop being reactive to criticism or praise. That's not indifference, but centeredness. You cultivate an inner equilibrium where external judgments are received without disturbance, weighed against your own reasoned understanding, but never allowed to unsettle your peace. This balance is a testament to your growing self-sufficiency. You begin to practice justice, not only toward others, but toward yourself. You stop excusing your own lapses or failures. That's not harshness, but honesty. You hold yourself accountable with firmness and compassion, recognizing that growth comes from confronting truth, not evading it. This justice is the soil in which integrity flourishes. You stop fearing discomfort or hardship. That's not recklessness, but courage. You embrace the Stoic understanding that suffering is part of the human condition and that your response to it defines your character. You cultivate resilience, the ability to endure pain without losing your center, to recover without bitterness, to learn without despair. You begin to see how this discipline of reason and self-control is not a burden, but a liberation. You stop being enslaved by passions, fears, or social expectations. That's not cold detachment, but warm mastery. You become the captain of your own ship, steering through storms with steady hands and clear eyes. You stop seeking shortcuts or easy victories. That's not stubbornness, but wisdom. You understand that true strength is built over time through consistent practice and deliberate effort. You embrace the slow, sometimes arduous process of self-cultivation, knowing that this is the path to enduring freedom. You begin to value silence and reflection as essential tools in this journey. You stop filling every moment with noise or distraction. That's not avoidance, but presence. You cultivate the habit of stepping back from the frenzy of life to observe your thoughts, emotions, and actions with clarity. This reflective space is where reason asserts its authority and where your moral compass is recalibrated. You stop confusing activity with progress. That's not productivity, but illusion. You cultivate the wisdom to discern what actions truly advance your growth and which serve only to distract or comfort. This discernment sharpens your focus and strengthens your resolve. You begin to understand that self-discipline is not a solitary endeavor, but one that integrates your whole being. You stop fragmenting yourself into conflicting parts. That's not denial, but unity. You bring your mind, emotions, and actions into harmony under the guidance of reason and virtue. This integration is the foundation of your self-sufficiency. You stop fearing failure as a permanent defeat. That's not complacency, but courage. You embrace mistakes as valuable lessons, as steps along the path of mastery. You cultivate resilience by learning to rise after each fall, to persist with renewed wisdom and determination. You begin to embody the Stoic ideal of the sage in miniature, not as a distant figure of perfection, but as a living presence within your daily life. You stop waiting for a moment of heroic transformation. Instead, you engage in the steady, disciplined effort that shapes your character moment by moment. You stop being swayed by fleeting emotions or external pressures. That's not rigidity, but steadfastness. You cultivate an inner fortress where reason reigns supreme and virtue guides your every step. This fortress is your sanctuary, your source of unshakable strength. You begin to see life's challenges not as obstacles to your happiness, but as opportunities to exercise your self-mastery. You stop avoiding discomfort or difficulty. That's not recklessness, but wisdom. You embrace the hard path because it leads to the freedom that comes from conquered passions and disciplined reason. You stop seeking refuge in illusions of control over the uncontrollable. That's not resignation, but clarity. You focus your efforts on what lies within your power, your judgments, choices, and actions, and accept with equanimity what lies beyond. You begin to understand that the practice of self-discipline and rational control is the backbone of your journey to self-sufficiency. You stop wishing for external circumstances to align with your desires. That's not pessimism, but realism. You cultivate the strength to endure and thrive regardless of what life presents. You stop being a passive actor in your own story. That's not arrogance, but responsibility. You take up the mantle of your own growth and freedom with determination and grace. This is the path of the Stoic hero, the path of self-mastery forged through discipline, reason, and unwavering commitment. You begin to recognize the subtle chains that bind you, not forged by iron or steel, but by fear, attachment, and the ceaseless pull of social pressure. These are the obstacles that undermine your quest for self-sufficiency, the silent thieves of your inner freedom. You stop pretending that such dependencies are unavoidable. That's not denial but awareness. You understand that to become your own hero, you must confront these forces directly, not shy away from them. Fear is among the most insidious of these chains. You stop allowing it to dictate your choices or cloud your judgment. That's not recklessness, but courage, the kind that arises from clear-eyed acceptance of reality. Fear thrives in the unknown, in uncertainty, in the illusion of control lost. You begin to practice mindfulness, the art of observing fear without surrendering to it, of acknowledging its presence without being paralyzed. This mindful stance weakens fear's grip and awakens your latent strength. Attachment, too, reveals its subtle tyranny. You stop clinging to people, possessions, or outcomes as if your happiness depended solely on them. That's not cold detachment, but enlightened freedom. You cultivate acceptance of impermanence, understanding that all external things are transient and beyond your ultimate control. This acceptance does not diminish your capacity for love or joy, but frees them from the pain of expectation and loss. Social pressure, perhaps the most pervasive obstacle, demands conformity and approval. You stop surrendering your autonomy to the whims of others. That's not arrogance, but discernment. You cultivate boundaries, the kind that protect your inner life without cutting you off from the world. You begin to understand that true belonging arises not from submission, but from standing firm in your own values and reason. This stance is often lonely, but it is the price of genuine freedom. You start to see that these obstacles are intertwined, each reinforcing the other. Fear fuels attachment. Attachment magnifies social pressure. Social pressure deepens fear. You stop being a passive victim of this cycle. That's not helplessness, but empowerment. You embrace Stoic strategies designed precisely to break these chains. Foremost among these is the acceptance of fate, the Stoic doctrine of amor fati. You stop resisting what life brings. That's not resignation, but active embrace. You cultivate the wisdom to distinguish between what lies within your control and what does not. This distinction is the key that unlocks your agency. You focus your efforts on your own judgments, choices, and actions, releasing the rest to the indifferent flow of the universe. You begin to practice mindfulness not as a trendy exercise, but as a rigorous discipline. You stop reacting automatically to fear, desire, or social pressures. Instead, you observe these impulses as passing phenomena, neither good nor bad in themselves. This observation creates a gap between stimulus and response, a gap where reason can assert control. You cultivate the habit of pausing before acting, of choosing virtue over convenience. You stop seeking comfort as an end in itself. That's not asceticism, but realism. You embrace discomfort as a necessary companion on the path to self-reliance. This embrace is not masochism, but a recognition that growth often requires pain, effort, and sacrifice. You learn to endure hardship with equanimity, to see it as the forge in which your inner strength is tempered. You begin to understand that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a doorway to deeper resilience. You stop hiding your fears or flaws. That's not exhibitionism, but honesty. You acknowledge your vulnerabilities with courage, neither denying them nor being overwhelmed by them. This honest confrontation disarms their power to control you. You cultivate emotional control, not by suppressing feelings, but by regulating their influence on your actions. You stop being swept away by anger, envy, or despair. That's not coldness, but mastery. You learn to channel emotions constructively, using them as signals rather than commands. This regulation is the essence of Stoic virtue. You stop confusing emotional suppression with emotional strength. That's not Stoicism, but misunderstanding. True strength lies in feeling fully, yet acting wisely. You cultivate a balance where emotions inform but do not dictate, where passion is tempered by reason, and where compassion coexists with firmness. You begin to appreciate how social pressure can be resisted through the cultivation of an inner citadel. You stop seeking approval at the cost of your integrity. That's not stubbornness, but fidelity to self. You develop the courage to stand alone if necessary, knowing that external validation is fleeting and unreliable. You stop fearing isolation as the worst fate. That's not loneliness, but self-possession. You cultivate a relationship with yourself that is rich, sustaining, and sovereign. This relationship becomes the foundation from which all other connections flow. You begin to practice discernment in your relationships and associations. You stop allowing toxic influences or manipulative dynamics to erode your autonomy. That's not judgmentalism, but self-care. You set boundaries that safeguard your inner freedom while allowing genuine connection. You stop confusing dependency with love or loyalty. That's not cynicism, but clarity. You cultivate relationships based on mutual respect and autonomy, where each person supports the other's growth rather than fostering dependence. You begin to see that overcoming external dependency is not about withdrawal, but about mastery. You stop fleeing the world in search of solitude. That's not isolation, but balance. You engage with life fully, participating in community and society, yet maintaining the sovereignty of your own mind and virtue. You stop confusing comfort with security. That's not fearfulness, but realism. You understand that true security arises from within, the strength to endure uncertainty, to face adversity, and to remain steady regardless of circumstance. You cultivate acceptance, the willingness to receive life as it comes without resistance or complaint. You stop resisting pain, loss, or change. That's not passivity, but wisdom. You embrace the flux of existence, knowing that your power lies not in controlling events, but in mastering your response. You begin to practice gratitude, not as a fleeting emotion, but as a cultivated habit. You stop focusing on what is lacking or lost. That's not denial, but perspective. You recognize the abundance present in your capacity to choose, to reason, and to grow. You stop being trapped in cycles of craving and aversion. That's not indifference, but freedom. You cultivate equanimity, the calm center from which you meet life's ups and downs with steady resolve. You begin to see the paradox that true freedom requires embracing vulnerability and discomfort, not fleeing from them. You stop seeking easy paths or quick escapes. That's not stubbornness, but courage. You welcome challenges as allies in the pursuit of self-sufficiency. You stop confusing weakness with sensitivity. That's not callousness, but strength. You cultivate an open heart that is neither brittle nor overwhelmed, that feels deeply yet stands firm. You begin to embody the Stoic ideal of resilience, the capacity to endure, adapt, and grow amid hardship. You stop fearing failure or loss as final defeats. That's not complacency, but wisdom. You see them as transient trials that test and strengthen your character. You stop being seduced by illusions of control over external events. That's not resignation, but clarity. You focus on what lies within your power, your judgments, choices, and actions, and accept with equanimity what lies beyond. You cultivate the habit of reflection, examining your responses to fear, attachment, and social pressure with honesty and courage. You stop repeating patterns that undermine your autonomy. That's not self-criticism, but growth. You learn from each experience, refining your inner strength. You stop seeking refuge in distractions or comforts that numb rather than heal. That's not asceticism, but integrity. You face your challenges head-on, knowing that true freedom is forged through engagement, not avoidance. You begin to appreciate that the path to self-sufficiency is neither smooth nor easy. You stop expecting quick victories or easy answers. That's not pessimism, but realism. You embrace the lifelong pursuit of growth, resilience, and inner mastery. You stop looking outside for heroes or saviors. That's not cynicism, but empowerment. You become your own hero, not because the world demands it, but because you have awakened to the power within yourself to endure, to choose, and to flourish. True empowerment is not a gift bestowed by fortune, nor a title granted by others. It is the quiet, unyielding mastery of oneself, the journey of becoming your own hero. You stop looking outward for validation, for guidance, for salvation. That's not abandonment, but awakening. The path to inner freedom begins with leading yourself, with assuming full responsibility for your choices, your thoughts, your actions, and above all, your character. You begin to see that leadership is first an inward act. You stop deferring to external authorities as the arbiters of your worth or destiny. That's not rebellion, but sovereignty. You cultivate the ability to govern yourself with wisdom and integrity, to stand firm amid the shifting tides of circumstance and opinion. This self-leadership is the foundation upon which all other forms of influence rest. You stop confusing power with control over others. That's not strength, but weakness. True power arises from the mastery of your own mind and emotions. You begin to embody the Stoic ideal, the sage who is unshaken by praise or blame, success or failure, gain or loss. You cultivate a tranquility born not of passivity, but of profound self-possession. This inner mastery demands courage, the courage to confront your own flaws, fears, and limitations without evasion or denial. You stop hiding behind excuses or illusions. That's not harshness, but honesty. You embrace the reality of your humanity, knowing that true heroism is forged not in perfection, but in the relentless pursuit of virtue despite imperfection. You begin to understand that the journey towards self-sufficiency is a lifelong pursuit, a continuous refining of your character and judgment. You stop expecting sudden transformations or easy victories. That's not pessimism, but realism. You embrace the slow, steady growth that comes from persistent effort and reflection. You cultivate resilience, the capacity to endure hardship without losing your center, to recover from failure without despair, to maintain your commitment to virtue in the face of temptation and adversity. You stop fearing suffering as a sign of weakness. That's not callousness, but wisdom. You see suffering as the crucible in which your inner strength is forged. You begin to appreciate the paradox that true freedom is found not in the absence of constraints, but in the mastery of one's response to them. You stop seeking to control what lies beyond your power. That's not resignation, but clarity. You focus your energy on what you can govern, your own mind and actions, and accept with equanimity what you cannot. You cultivate the Stoic virtues, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, not as abstract ideals, but as practical guides for your daily life. You stop compartmentalizing your values or compromising them for convenience. That's not rigidity, but integrity. You live these virtues as the roots from which your freedom and happiness grow. You begin to see your life as a series of choices, each an opportunity to embody your highest self. You stop being a passive recipient of fate. That's not arrogance, but responsibility. You take up the mantle of your own growth and freedom with determination and grace. You stop seeking external approval or fear of judgment. That's not isolation, but self-possession. You cultivate an inner authority that is independent and unwavering, a voice that guides you through the noise of the world with clarity and conviction. You begin to embody the Stoic ideal of the hero, not the flamboyant figure of legend, but the silent warrior who battles daily for self-mastery and virtue. You stop waiting for heroic moments. That's not impatience, but presence. You recognize that heroism is found in the ordinary acts of discipline, courage, and integrity that define your character. You stop fearing solitude as emptiness. That's not loneliness, but self-containment. You cultivate a relationship with yourself that is rich, sustaining, and sovereign. This inner companionship becomes the foundation of your strength and freedom. You begin to appreciate that true influence flows not from domination, but from example. You stop trying to control others. That's not weakness, but wisdom. You recognize that by mastering yourself, you inspire others to awaken their own inner heroes. You stop confusing happiness with pleasure or external success. That's not pessimism, but clarity. You cultivate a deeper joy rooted in the tranquility that comes from living in accordance with reason and virtue. You begin to embrace the Stoic practice of daily reflection, examining your actions and intentions with honesty and compassion. You stop hiding from your mistakes. That's not self-criticism, but growth. You learn from each experience, refining your path towards self-sufficiency. You stop seeking shortcuts or easy answers. That's not stubbornness, but commitment. You understand that the journey is the reward, and that every step taken in virtue is a victory in itself. You begin to embody the paradox of presence and self-containment, the ability to engage fully with the world while remaining anchored in your inner freedom. You stop being swept away by the currents of circumstance. That's not detachment, but mastery. You cultivate silence, not as absence, but as presence, the space where your reason and virtue can assert their authority. You stop filling your mind with noise and distraction. That's not avoidance, but clarity. You create room for your true self to emerge. You begin to see that becoming your own hero is not a solitary feat, but a deeply personal journey that resonates outward. You stop waiting for external validation. That's not isolation, but empowerment. Your strength becomes a beacon, a quiet call to others to awaken their own inner sovereignty. You stop fearing the challenges of growth. That's not recklessness, but courage. You embrace the difficulties and uncertainties of life as the very conditions that awaken your true power. You begin to live with an unwavering resolve, a steadfast commitment to your own freedom and virtue. You stop compromising your principles for comfort or convenience. That's not rigidity, but fidelity to your highest self. You recognize that the path of the Stoic hero is not marked by grand gestures or dramatic victories, but by the relentless, humble work of self-mastery. You stop seeking glory. That's not humility, but clarity. You serve a higher cause, the cultivation of your own character and the pursuit of true freedom. You begin to see yourself not as a passive participant in life, but as its architect and sovereign. You stop blaming fate or others for your condition. That's not harshness, but responsibility. You assume the mantle of your own growth with dignity and resolve. You stop waiting for permission to be free. That's not defiance, but awakening. You claim your birthright, the freedom that comes from the mastery of your own mind and the courage to live according to reason and virtue. You begin to understand that this journey is the highest form of heroism, the kind that needs no audience, no applause, no external reward. You stop seeking validation from the world. That's not indifference, but sovereignty. You embody the truth that the greatest hero you will ever know is the one who stands silent and firm within you. You stop looking outside for rescue or affirmation. That's not despair, but empowerment. You live as the author of your own story, the guardian of your own virtue, the sovereign of your own destiny. This is the Stoic path, the path of inner freedom, resilience, and lifelong growth. Will you answer the call and become your own hero?